Webcasting from Southeast Kansas, I'm Jonathan Switzer, and this is the Roboblog Chronicles, episode 8.5, the comments thread episode for the video game discussion I did last week. We'll start off by mentioning the one Robotech video gaming project I completely failed to mention in our previous episode. Robotech Crystal Dreams for the Nintendo 64. Now this is the Electronic Entertainment Expo 1998 promo comic book produced by Antarctic Press for GameTech. One of the few artifacts of this game that were actually produced. Certainly the most interesting of the artifacts produced. Basically tells the story of, I think, like the first stage or so of the game. The interesting thing that McKeever mentioned regarding Crystal Dreams is that the next game that GameTech was going to produce was going to be a Sentinels-based game. And I did some digging around the internet, found an old FAQ that further explained that while the first game, Crystal Dreams, was a VF1-based shooter set in space, the next one was going to be a ground-based game, which I suppose means hover tanks, since excuse me, since the Cyclone wasn't available yet, according to the then-established Sentinels canon. But, you know, still going from a VF1 game to a ground-based game is exactly what Vicious Cycle wound up doing for Battlecry and Invasion. So, you know, I just thought that was kind of an interesting parallel. You know, after playing Invasion again, right after completing the last episode of Roboblog Chronicles, I think I am sort of in agreement with those like Brian here, who say Invasion was good, but not great. It's certainly playable. It's certainly, you know, an alright game, but I don't think it's worth the $40 that I paid for it. JHC here paid $10, which, and I think it's worth a little more than that. But you know, let's, you know, for a $10 game, yeah, it's excellent, it's great, it's awesome. But I don't think it's actually worth the full retail it originally went for, and continues to go for at Robotech.com, by the way. And as Trey's points out, it apparently was produced over the course of merely 6 months, which explains why you go halfway through the game and then you switch up main characters and find yourself playing through the same stages all over again. It also explains why, as Skull23 points out, all the human bad guys look exactly the same. And I think it explains why the character models don't have much character to them. I think it's Skull23 here who talks about the characters of Battlecry as being one of the reasons why Battlecry works so much better. And you actually get to see nice character portraits of all these characters. You get to connect with those characters better. Whereas in Invasion, you get voices, but you don't actually get to really connect with those characters. Part of it is that you hear those voices, and as a Robotech fan, you're probably still thinking of the characters that these actors have portrayed before. I mean, especially the central characters, Locke and the main female character, I forget her name. You know, the voice that Locke keeps hearing, that he keeps hearing sort of as his own. I forget exactly how the plot works, so yeah, I'm not sure if that's actually his voice or, you know, the person whose genetic template is based on her. I forget if he turns out to be an Invid simul agent or if he winds up being a brainwashed human. I forget exactly how that works. But, you know, that voice is Scott Bernard's voice. It's Greg Snegoff. And then the main female character is Melanie McQueen. And then the central, you know, relationship there winds up being an inverse of the Scott Bernard-Marlene relationship. So, you know, you've got, for a Robotech fan, you've got that working in the background, and consequently, these don't feel like their own characters. At least that's the way I see it. Whereas there aren't any obvious parallels to among the characters in Robotech Battlecry. These aren't just, you know, the any members of the old Macross cast with, you know, the names filed off. You know, so yeah, Battlecry has a much stronger storyline. That is another thing it has up on Invasion. But the thing is, Battlecry also provides an experience you can't get in another game. You know, there isn't another major, you know, piloting a transformable fighter plane that turns into a robot game out there on the market. Whereas Invasion is trying to reproduce the experience of another game with Robotech elements. There is far too much Halo in the pot there. There's far too much Halo and not enough Robotech in Invasion. And that's not a problem necessarily for the Robotech fan who's buying the game, who's, you know, just happy to have a most-beta game. For the general gamer, though, that's a major problem. And that's probably one of the reasons why Invasion didn't sell quite as well as it could have. I also think the lack of the cell shading is a problem in branding more than anything else. You know, Battlecry leaves you with an impression of what a Robotech game is supposed to be, and then Invasion totally, you know, throws that out the window by going for a completely different aesthetic and feel. While the new generation is not the Macross saga, and has its own feel, and has its own setting and unique properties, they really, I think, should have gone out of their way to create a stronger knit connection between the two games. If just, you know, in a general aesthetic sense. I do understand what Trey's was saying about the new generation era having a darker feel about it, since, you know, yeah, Invid dominated Earth. You know, much darker than, you know, the sort of optimistic feel of the post-Macross era, that sort of trying to rebuild the well, okay, honestly, if you actually think about it, the post-Macross era is pretty depressing too, trying to rebuild the shattered Earth. But at the same time, you know, there is still some of that leftover optimism from the Macross era at that point. I don't know. I just think that Invasion is, you know, a bundle of missed opportunities. I think that's all the time I have. There is definitely more discussion on this topic I would like to do. I'll probably do that in the first half of the next episode. That said, this is Captain JLS signing off.